the civil society. So today we formed this panel. I'm the moderator for today. I'm doing an MPhil in environmental change management at University of Oxford. And we also have here with us Brian Pack, who is a business and catalyst at New World Development Company Limited. Brian waving at us. And then Diane Ng is a co-founder at Hot Strengths, as well as Hermia Chan, business outreach manager at FAIR Hong Kong. So when we come to think of climate change and its impact on Hong Kong, we often come across this image. This is a simulation by Climate Central showing what would the impact of sea level rise be on our Team Satcher, which is a very prominent central business area of Hong Kong. And we also have an uprise of youth climate activists doing Fridays for Future movement in Hong Kong, saying words like adults be responsible for climate change. And as youth, we increasingly think that the older generation is giving this responsibility of taking care of the earth to our generation. So how are youth leaders going to respond? Looking at the impacts of climate change, of course, there are both local and global impacts. So it's not only an issue relating to Hong Kong, but also an issue of climate justice. Looking at this map of sea level rise in different areas, especially in Pacific Island countries, they're facing the imminent threat. It's not only an issue of their economic development, but also an issue of life and death. And IPCC published a special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius, stating that it's urgent for us to reach net zero carbon emission in order to keep our temperature rise within 1.5 degrees Celsius. That could affect catastrophic impact on our ecosystem and human society. Climate action is urgent in a way that if we actively decarbonize, we are only spending 0.1% of GDP, and if there's no action, we're losing 30% of global economic production, according to research. And I'd like to draw attention to this very special piece of research published in 2020 in Science, showing that actually only 10% of all COVID recovery package funds can already support our clean energy investment needs, which can put our Earth to a pathway which is aligned with the Paris Agreement. However, obviously, we are still seeing a dislinkage between green recovery needs and COVID pandemic recovery. So some governments still do not align these two. While Hong Kong is stepping up its ambition as a leading world city, we will strive to achieve carbon neutrality by the year of 2050, stated in the 2020 policy address. And I remember attending the Conference of Youth for Climate Change, where the Secretary General for the UN, Antonio Guterres, shared that our message must not be a message of despair, but a message of hope. Things can be done, resources exist, and what is still missing is political will. And this is where youth initiative is extremely important. That's why today I've brought with me several young leaders advancing climate action in different sectors who I really admire, which includes Hermia in the social sector. She's doing a lot of NGO work on promoting university students' awareness on sustainability through Think Ocean, as well as Bye Bye Plastic Bag. And Brian is working in the corporate sector, also a rising young professional. He's focusing his work on sustainable finance and ESG integration, while Diane, working in the public sector, I can say, or in the academia, she's doing a lot of public advocacy work against reclamation and doing a climate resilient city development, as well as environmental and ecological education. For me personally, myself, I also sit on a government committee called the Council for Sustainable Development in Hong Kong. We are part of the committee that generated the carbon neutrality target by 2050. As a part of the committee, as a youth member in it, I initiated to host a youth forum on the long-term decarbonization strategy, hoping to increase the awareness of public on this issue, especially youth, telling youth why is it important to change our lifestyle behavior in compliance with the carbon neutrality target. And in order to bring myself to the world and to increase my international exposure and perspective, I pursued a master's in environmental change and management at Oxford starting 2019. I would like to share an insightful learning from the study there, which is a course taught by Kate Raworth, the founder of the concept of donut economics. She told us that an economy should be designed to thrive, not grow. What is meant by thriving? Thriving means that we are all living in an economy where we can all enjoy a good quality of life, which is not characterized by endless or boundless growth. Her concept of donut economics include fulfilling the needs of social foundation, which is like basic water, ending poverty, having energy access to all, while keeping our development within the ecological ceiling of the planet. You can see that the red cells showing that those boundaries are already surpassed, including climate change, biodiversity loss, land conversion, and nitrogen and phosphorus loading. And the experience to attend COP25 was also a highlight in my environmental journey, where we met the executive secretary of UNFCCC, Patricia Espinosa. She highlighted how climate change should be embedded into city planning and budgeting policies in all levels of government. And I've also brought this finding back to the context of Hong Kong, informing our policy and urging the government to take a more active approach on building our city's climate resilience. And as a prosperous city with ample resources and also a lot of good pilot case study in our small green finance and green tech initiatives, I believe Hong Kong also has the capacity to empower and assist least developed countries and grassroots movements of indigenous communities and least developed countries to amplify their collective voice in climate action. And lastly, I'd like to share a bit of my own environmental group called FAIR, and Hermia is also part of our organization. We believe that local tourism is a way to combat climate change, given that a lot of Hong Kong people enjoy going overseas during the weekends. And we founded FAIR Hong Kong with the aim of promoting the local ecological and historical assets to the public. We adopt a bottom-up approach to change our lifestyle behavior. Of course, during COVID times, everyone started to realize the importance of local tourism and how ecotourism can also be a way to revive our economy, not only overseas travel. So we are planning a lot more new initiatives in the coming year, hopefully in different forms such as virtual tour as well as online workshops, so that different communities can be empowered to realize the local beauty surrounding us. And this is our key mission and action areas. We hope to promote local sustainable low carbon tourism in order to lower carbon emission per capita in our air aviation industry, as well as raise carbon literacy and environmental awareness of the public. And our impact model begins by providing an experiential learning experience and then educate the public on the knowledge about Hong Kong nature, and eventually to enlighten them and empower them to do similar things in promoting local tourist spots. And last but not least, I'd like to share one of my readings, which is from Rutger Bregman on a hopeful history. We see a lot of global and local challenges nowadays, and the COVID pandemic bringing a lot of sufferings to humankind. But if our grim view of humanity can be a nocebo, which is like things might not be so bad, but we keep thinking it in a negative way, so the negativity keeps reinforcing. So what about we start paving a way for a hopeful future by rethinking and changing our perspective on how we view human and writing our own story of hope with our youth leaders, with our uprising youth leader who can help Hong Kong to migrate in the low carbon pathway. And now I'd like to invite Brian first to introduce a story in promoting sustainable finance in the corporate sector and how his work is influencing different property developers and other players and investors in the market, so that Hong Kong can be a leading and can play a more leading role in the finance industry. Brian, please.
Hi, everyone. So thanks, Natalie, for the insightful introduction. I'm Brian from New World Development, and before I begin, I'd also like to thank Esther and CDL for hosting this event. It's certainly a timely opportunity to learn from one another and connect with dialogue, especially in times like these where everyone seems ever more alienated by the pandemic and ongoing socioeconomic challenges. So, without further ado, let me begin with an overview of what I do at the sustainability team. As a business catalyst, I help implement and drive various sustainability projects, ranging from coordinating conferences and establishing new internal sustainability policies to managing deals in sustainable finance and projects that involves integration with startup technologies. The ultimate goal here is to align business impact and operations with considerations in environmental, social, and governance issues. I also work closely with stakeholders across departments internally and with various partners externally to build awareness, partnerships, and technical support required to push through these projects that ultimately aims to improve the company's ESG performance. In the next couple of slides or so, I would like to take the opportunity to reflect on some of the key moments of my journey in corporate sustainability so far and share with you some of the key takeaways. Coming from a background in public policy, it's extremely exciting to witness and experience firsthand the impact of public policies on sustainability. Working within a corporation, I follow closely and monitor ESG related regulation and investor expectations. Publicly listed companies like New World are expected to disclose more and more ESG data. For example, how gender diverse is your board of directors or how much carbon emissions your company is generating. These are expectations that present both challenges but also opportunities. On one hand, greater scrutiny and transparency on ESG performance and metrics means greater risk if your company is doing poorly on certain aspects, say on climate action. Investors would often call you out for not performing as well in particular aspects, and they could potentially decide not to invest in your company because of that. But at the same time, having these non financial performance data opens up opportunities for us corporates, for investors, but as well as individuals like yourselves to get to evaluate companies based on non financial performances. And most importantly, with these metrics, it's easier to first track and second scale sustainability initiatives and programs. You could start to use these metrics for various purposes, such as inversely tying the performance of your company's energy usage to your CEO's annual paycheck. Or in the case that I'd like to highlight, is it offers new opportunities in sustainable financing, which I've been heavily involved lately. We've seen various sustainability related products and financing instruments in the past few years, ranging from green loans, green bonds, and social bonds, etc. More recently, we see the development of a new kind of bond called the sustainability linked bond. Earlier this month, after weeks of hard work, our team at New World issued Asia's first sustainability linked bond. And what's really interesting about this type of bond is that it's embedded with a penalty system that holds issuers, i.e., New World in this case, accountable to a given ESG performance metric and KPI. And in our case, it's tied to the first phase of our renewable energy roadmap, which pledges to achieving 100% renewable energy in the Greater Bay Area and more specifically amongst our rental properties. And our bond specifically was oversubscribed, meaning it was extremely well received by investors and it achieved a relatively low yield, meaning it helped the company secure financing through the bond at a low borrowing cost. So, in essence, through this bond, we opened up a new and cheaper financing channel to help drive our company's sustainability goals, which is essentially linked to a form of climate action. This may all sound quite simple and straightforward at first glance, but without the proper policies, processes, and support that required years of work and engagement internally, that wouldn't have been possible. And so, one of the key things I've learned along the way is that advancing corporate sustainability requires persistence. Now, let's turn our attention to startups. At New World, another key initiative I've been involved in is Impact Commons, which is Hong Kong's first UN SDG-focused accelerator program. Through a 8-week business integration program, Impact Commons helps sustainability-driven startups scale their businesses by piloting technologies and rolling out products within New World businesses. I want to bring out startups to emphasize the message that big corporates aren't enough to addressing climate change. In fact, you see corporates relying on plenty of new technologies and solutions developed by startups. For example, many companies are starting to measure their climate risk exposures using technologies developed by startups by the likes of Carbon Delta. For those who aren't familiar with this topic, essentially what's happening is a lot of companies, such as insurance companies, real estate companies, financial institutions, for example, are increasingly pressured to measure and sort of disclose their um, how the level of exposure that their physical assets, like office buildings, are to floods, heat, and other climate hazards. And in fact, you see various rating agencies acquiring fintech startups and their solutions to do what I've just described, to measure how exposed companies are to climate hazards. So, as a mini conclusion, we must actively look not just internally for support to drive climate action, but externally as well. So far, I'm sure everyone agrees that the challenges of climate change require collective and coordinated response across sectors and industries. And traditionally, we rely on governments to take the lead. But as trust towards governments continue to erode, it becomes paramount for businesses to really step up their game, right? And take an active role on issues like these. No doubt governments play an important role in developing policies, regulatory frameworks to set national and global agendas, but it ultimately falls onto the hands of businesses to take a lead in building partnerships that drive change on the ground. I think this is also one of the reasons why it's meaningful and exciting to work in corporate sustainability. A key challenge I've observed and experienced so far is that it can sometimes be difficult to find that precise solution and course of action required. We know we need to reach net zero, set science-based emission targets, and align to the Paris Agreement, etc., But how exactly do we do that, right? Fundamentally, how do we activate change without the necessary knowledge and the tools to do so? This is a key question that I constantly ask myself. I believe that the key solution here is to build strong and lasting partnerships. To make sustainability happen, we need partners across the internal departments, industry peers, and across different communities. Partners do not only become a very important source of knowledge and technical support, but they often help generate credibility and enduring trust among stakeholders. I believe as young professionals, we should make use of forums, conferences, and really take the opportunity to build networks that could potentially evolve into partnerships in the future. Keeping an open mind to absorb information and learn what others have been doing would definitely prove valuable in driving sustainability in our respective roles. Conscious of time, I'd like to end here by getting us all to rethink what we mean by youth. I think we should depart from the literal meaning of youth as a distinct demographic, but I believe it would be helpful to speak about youth as a state of mind. We should celebrate the qualities of youth as a way of thinking and mode of inquiry. We want to keep asking questions and to remain curious about the new technologies and solutions out there that will together help us celebrate progress in sustainable development. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian, for wonderful sharing. I really like your final remark of thinking of youth as a state of mind, that we keep learning, keep innovating, and appreciating new technologies. So now I'll pass the time to Hermia to share her story on ocean and plastic education for university students on advancing sustainability.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So hi, I'm Hermia, I'm from Hong Kong, and thank you so much for having me here today. And I would like to just share a little bit of my journey of turning knowledge into actions. So let's begin with a little short introduction. I'm a year 3 student doing global studies at the Chinese University of Hong Kong right now. I'm also an ocean lover, so you can see from my presentation, a lot of the story I'm sharing will be ocean related topics. And lastly, I'm not sure if you guys know about this reference. This is how Trump described it, Greta Thunberg, in one of his tweets. Me putting it here, I just want to show the irony. And like Greta, I'm quite concerned about climate change and how it would impact my future. And therefore, I started this journey. So at the very beginning, I believe a lot of change makers, we all have that wait, what moment. So the wait, what moment is referring to a situation where you came across a random but shocking fact or data that makes you wonder, wait, what, why? Like, how could that happen? And why would we allow that to happen? And how could I not know about it before? So my wait, what moment was here when I randomly came across a documentary called Cowspiracy when I was in high school. Cowspiracy is a documentary talking about the meat industry and the seafood industry, how it is overexploiting our planet, over consuming the resources, and how our diet is actually making a huge impact on our environment. After watching this documentary, it still took me a lot of time to process. After a year or so, I choose to live a vegetarian lifestyle to minimize my impact on the environment and also like minimizing my carbon footprint. But that is just some behavioral change. And this is when all my friends come to play a part. Literally all my friends in my life has once in a lifetime told me that one person can make a huge difference. Like you being vegetarian yourself, but there are still a lot of people eating meat out there. You can't make any difference. Yes and no. Yes, because I can tell from my experience, I'm the only vegetarian in my high school. I'm not kidding. And no one followed my journey at all. So that is a yes. But no, because I believe one person could make a much greater difference in the world. But in high school, I didn't know what to do, but that question got stuck in my head all the way until I entered university. So when I enter university, this is when I finally have a chance and have the courage to take my first action. And being very honest with you, it all started one day. I was looking at my CV. I'm like, maybe I need some more volunteering experience. So yeah, I don't know what to do. So I'm thinking my passion at that time was about animal rights and environmental protection. So why don't I find an organization with like similar interests? So thankfully, I found this amazing organization called the Hong Kong Shark Foundation. They advocate for reduce in shark fin consumption, actually like a no to shark fin consumption. And working with them, I actually acquired a lot of knowledge about shark playing a huge role in the biodiversity and food chain, and how how our diet could make a huge impact on ocean, and what actually education can do to reduce these kind of consumption. Because the founder here, she actually do a lot of school talks to schools and teaching kids why we shouldn't consume shark fin. Shark fin is actually quite toxic because of all the ocean pollutions. It's not good for your body. You're paying a lot of money to buy something that is actually harmful to your body. And I know that education actually plays a huge role in people's in making these changes. So yeah, but my journey didn't stop there because I noticed there's another challenge to the ocean apart from loss of biodiversity, and it is the very famous plastic pollution. And I'm very lucky that some of my friends, they wanted to found an organization, a youth initiative actually, called the Bye Bye Plastic in Hong Kong. And I joined their organization because I noticed that being volunteer, although you can acquire a lot of knowledge and you get to know more people, but you don't get to organize activities that you really want to do. So I joined this organization. We get to set up booths at school, at malls. We teaching kids here to turn your old unwanted clothes into reusable bags. And there's me here very nervously talking to the environmental secretary. Yeah, and we also organize beach cleanups for younger kids. And personally, behavioral wise, I also inspired by my teammates. They are hardcore zero waste practitioners, so I use a lot less plastic personally as well. And but being that, after noticing plastic pollution, I started reading more news and also talking to my friends, and also meeting different organizations. I noticed that plastic is not like the only challenge either. And our ocean is facing way too many challenges and problems, and one of which will be climate change. The increase in carbon dioxide emission actually would cause ocean acidification, and it's also causing coral bleaching and stuff like that. So, and a lot of university students are not aware of this at all. So here is me and two of my friends, we decided to organize a webinar series actually earlier last year. We organized 3 episodes. We go about ocean sustainability. We have this professors talking about how ocean acidification is actually impacting the shells. What are those creatures called? Like the creatures with shells. Get what I mean? And like ocean sustainability in general. We also have like people from the fashion industry. We talk about how fashion is doing so much pollution to the ocean. And because of COVID, we actually have a very great chance to invite this lady from Palestine to talk about how fast fashion is doing to her country. And we thankfully reached out to over 80 participants from more than 20 universities. But I'm not here today to tell you my journey. I'm here to tell you what I have learned from my journey. And I hope this could be a takeaway message to you. For those who want to make wants to make an impact on like their communities, here are 4 steps that I noticed. The first one will be awareness. This is when you get to know about the information, you want to know more about it, you start questioning why, what can I do more to help with this situation? And second step will be active participation. So you join your local activities organized by your local communities. It could be a beach cleanup. It could be volunteering with your recycling facilities. You get to know more people, you get to acquire knowledge that others, you can learn from others, and also acquire skills such as, for me, is like project management. It helps me a lot with like my later journey. And third one will be joining like related organizations. That gives you the autonomy to organize events that you really want to organize, and also building more connections with other people. And fourth will be initiating changes. This is when you have learn a lot and you are ready to see if there is like any gap that you can fill in your community, and you can use your innovation to initiate changes and help with people's life or help the environment. Some people might ask like what keeps me motivated the whole way, and I would say it's environmental awakening. I totally make this word up, but yeah, I think once you start to prioritize environment over your enjoyment or just like humans' enjoyment, you start to see the world differently. Taking plastic as an example, when I start to notice plastic is a big challenge, I noticed that I go to supermarket differently. Like, why is banana wrapped in plastics? Why is vegetable wrapped in plastics? Why do like detergents put into disposable bottles? And you start to question, it's not just personal behavior, it's also like companies' behavior, but government behavior. Like, why aren't companies offering more sustainable alternatives to us customers? And why aren't government regulating all these unnecessary packagings? So you start keep asking question, and it's just an unstoppable journey to me. So this is what I want to bring up the second takeaway message. For those of you who want to start living sustainably, don't be afraid to take the first step. We don't need a handful of people doing sustainable living perfectly, but we need a million of people to, not million, like billions of people doing it imperfectly. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. I still use plastics from time to time because it's so unavoidable, but try your best. And I noticed once you take your first step, your conscience will guide you the way, I believe. That is the case for me. And for those who wanted to take a try, I hope that is the case for you as well. And trust me, it is an unstoppable journey, and wish you all the best. Hope you have learned something from my sharing, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Hermia, for inspiring sharing. I think similar to you, I also had one like eureka environmental awakening moment, but it was not watching a documentary. It was interviewing a polar explorer who shared with me how polar ice caps were melting and the Earth is like trapped in an oven with escalating temperature. As a simile to describe climate change. And ever since then, I was like, oh my God, we're in this huge oven, and what are we going to do about it? And I've known Hermia for a couple of years, and I also found that how one small movie or one documentary could change someone's mind is very powerful. And I think using environmental education as a medium to change behavior is the way to go, especially for a lot of youth practitioners and youth activists like us. And this leads to Diane. Diane is also a student at Chinese University of Hong Kong, where she co-founded Hot Drinks with the aim to inspire people through ecotourism and teaching them about ecological knowledge. Diane will share more about her inspirations and her environmental activism journey.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yep,
Yes.
yep.
Thanks, Sylvia, for organizing this event. I'm glad to have this chance to exchange ideas with you all. And I'm Diane. Let me try to show it. Okay. I'm Diane. I'm the co-founder of two youth-initiated programs, Heartstrings and Understanding Reclamation from Plastics Reading. And I'm also doing ecological surveys and academic work in different institutions. I have started to capture the beauty of nature since I was in primary. At that time, I just went to different places alone without telling my parents to escape from the intense study pressure. I never thought of being an environmental activist, but becoming a teacher, a nurse, or a physiotherapist. One of the defining moments is that the countryside of Hong Kong was seriously damaged by visitors. Although it is glad to have more people recognize the beauty of the natural environment, it is upsetting to see irresponsible visitors' behaviors like littering, collecting plants, catching animals. I would like to do something to conserve the environment. So I asked my university classmates to form a group and apply for the environmental subsidy from the Shaw College, one of the colleges in the Chinese University of Hong Kong, to organize activities to instill the message of environmental conservation into the public. After studying environmental management, I finally realized that the damage brought by tourists to the environment is actually a case of tragedy of the commons. Tragedy of the commons is a concept first proposed by economist William Foster in 1833 and then applied in ecology by Harden in 1968. And tragedy of the commons occurs when individuals want to maximize profits, but they ignore the resource depletion in a phase where limited resources that are owned or unowned or commonly owned by the community. Benefits gained from the resources go to each user. However, costs are shared. You can imagine that when everyone is going to pick some plants in a park, there will be fewer and fewer plants in that park, and may end up with no plants because the degradation rate is much higher than the regeneration rate. Environmental education is not a measure that can bring instant effects, but what we are doing is to plant seeds of environmental conservation into people's hearts. Organizing a few events like eco-tours and workshops, we try to link our audience back to nature and allow them to have reflections. We prepared games, worksheets to deliver our message more clearly. There is always room for improvement. In 2018, the promotion of responsible tourist behavior is not a hot topic. Unlike now, the Hong Kong SAR government is recruiting ambassadors to promote hiking etiquette. So it is difficult to reach people at that time. On the other hand, CHK, here you can see that we was organizing a tour in CHK and Long Valley. CHK is not appealing to CHK students, and Long Valley is a place where course instructors often bring students to. Therefore, they are not attractive somehow. One can learn from trial and error. I guess it is hard to have a perfect plan. Like I always ask myself, like Brian, that oh, can I do better? Can I achieve more? Can I achieve more better results? Like I can reach more people. But somehow one can only learn from trial and error. Past experience enable me to do better in the next project. Land debate has been a very hot topic in Hong Kong. Ms. Carrie Lam, the chief executive, appointed 30 members to the task force on land supply to explore land supply options. In order to gather more audience from a wider background, we decided to adopt a multi-dimensional frame rather than only focusing on the environmental, social, or the economic aspects. We incorporated philosophy into our projects. Although classics seem to be old school, I guess most of the people may think like that, but I do believe that reading classics allow us to have new angles to view the current issue. Silent Spring, Social Contract, and The Republic are the three classics being discussed in that forum. We received positive feedbacks from the participants. Beyond projects, I'm also eager to explore different means to promote environmental conservation. In the summer of 2019, I studied a permaculture course in Australia and applied what I have learned in the presentation of the AAC&U conference. Although we are young, we have the ability and the power to make our planet better. Let no one despise your youth. Additionally, I have opened an Instagram account to share the shots taken in the countryside. Like what I have mentioned in this post, it is important to be visible. I love writing. I think doing things that you love and excel at allows you to have a chance to utilize your strengths and get a sense of achievement. Lastly, even when we put our greatest efforts, sometimes we may not we may not see the changes. We will never know when and how we can make changes, but keep in mind that Rome wasn't built in a day. That's the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diane, for sharing. I echo with your last paragraph saying how we never know when and how we will achieve the outcome, but we are like in this huge coalition, a small arrow in a huge arrow that we're pointing towards that direction, and maybe in 100 years time we'll see the outcome. But don't be discouraged by the immediate effect or some people not understanding what we are focusing on or what we're passionate about. So now we'll open up the floor for any questions from the public. Well, before questions start coming in, I do have a few questions for our passionate youth speakers. And as you all know, Hong Kong has just announced the 2050 carbon neutrality target, which is a very ambitious one. And some people are doubtful whether we can achieve that target. And I'd just like to have a quick survey to each of our speakers. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you in Hong Kong reaching our net zero target by 2050? And maybe drawing from your experience of interacting with the public, with students, or in Brian's case, interacting with other corporate, are they ready for this target? Maybe Brian, do you want to start first?
Sure. I'd give it a score of 7. I think professionals within the industry are certainly trying to be as informed as they can to be prepared with reaching this ambitious target. And yeah, so I think I'm fairly confident in terms of our ambitious level. But whether we're going to achieve it, I think it depends on whether we are able to work together and coordinate ourselves and really direct the right resources to the right place to scale technologies and yeah, to achieve this really meaningful target.
Great. What about Diane or Hermia?
I guess I will give 6 out of 10 because I think it depends on the government ambition to achieve carbon neutrality, more proactive strategies and measures should be carried out to lower the carbon emissions, apart from the proposed means like exploring new environmentally friendly technology and enhancing the energy efficiency of the buildings. The government should pay more efforts to understand the situation of the general public and the business sectors, to provide adequate support to them, as well as to launch more educational programs to achieve better results.
And for me, it's quite a difficult question to answer, to be honest, because I see this question from two different angles. If it's talking about the government's standard of achieving the goal, I believe we will achieve the goal because like the largest contributor will be energy, and we see that the government has quite a plan for reducing our carbon emission in energy by including importing energy from China, like renewable energy, but nuclear energy. Not sure how you define it, but yeah, importing energy is definitely one of the ways to go. But if we're talking about from a consumption aspect, we're still consuming a lot of imported product, and all of these are not included in like our per capita emissions. So we're basically we're just externalized all these emissions to other countries, in my opinion. So yeah, I think in Hong Kong production wise, we can achieve that goal. But if we're talking about Hong Kong people's impact on like the global scales, and I don't think they will even emphasize this question.
So quickly following up on Hermia's point, where we are ignoring a lot of consumption-based emission in our current accounting system because of issues related to double counting. What do you think is the way to go for us to drive awareness on consumption-based emission? And so do you support schemes like carbon labeling or different kind of tax and factual labeling on food or other items?
Should I go first? Because I kind of bring up this question. I would agree with carbon tax or carbon labeling, but in a way that only in a way that it is progressive, because a lot of like this uniform, if it's in a uniform tax system, then it will become a regressive one, which means the poor people, low income people, the vulnerables will be impacted the most in this policy. But at the same time, those who are actually using the most resources with the most money or power don't actually care about that little money, that little tax that is put it on their food or drinks. But the local, like the poor communities the most affected. So if it's gonna be a progressive tax, then yes, and we could even use the tax revenue invest it back to the communities, back to like the vulnerable people to help them just lessen the impact of the carbon tax on them.
What about Diane and Brian? Do you have thoughts on reducing consumption-based emission in an import-oriented economy of Hong Kong?
Yeah, I think just to add, to really change our way of consumption, I think it's good if we also focus on providing new products, and so to encourage people to organically change their way of consumption, offering substitutes such as plant-based diet, food, to replace the need to consume meat. And so through measures like these, it will be easier for people to adopt a new lifestyle, and it would reduce the risk of having a backlash. And I think from the government's point of view, it will be a good opportunity to develop new industries and take this opportunity to create new job opportunities, and the potential of also developing products that could in the future be exported to the region as well.
After listening to the sharing of Hermia, I have think of one quite upsetting scene when I was watching a YouTube video that an interviewer asking general public about their views regarding organic food. Actually, it is quite expensive, or even I have I often I sometimes buy organic food, and the cost of that vegetable is 3 times or 4 times that of the conventional one. It is hard to like launch or to set up some carbon tax to in terms of the consume to reduce the consumption of those general public. But I guess the government can do more to like launch educational programs to like promote the habit of eating more vegetables instead of just like punishing those poor people that they cannot eat organic food, so that you have to pay more. That's not fair.
Yes, I totally agree how important it is to form a just system, not only environmental-wise, but socially inclusive way of taxing different product items, and especially putting more effort in supporting our local agriculture in Hong Kong, because currently only 2% of our local vegetable are produced by farms here, but we have a lot of potential for organic farming, which can be done in a cheap way, and to produce food using systems such as permaculture and traditional way of farming that can lower the cost and transportation emission in freight as well. So now I'd like to ask each of you, what do you think is the role of youth in bringing together different stakeholders in achieving ambitious climate targets? So perhaps Brian mentioned just now that business sector alone is insufficient to reach the carbon neutral target. We must bring together like startups and other players in the field. And maybe Hermia can touch on how you collaborated with the government in different projects and how to put forward youth voice in the community.
Sure. Yeah, I think to foster collaboration, youth should really try and build more platforms and maintain close dialogue with each other, right? An important element of that is being an effective voice and to use your respective sphere of influences, however small it may be, to encourage those around you to think differently, to act differently, and to collaborate differently, not in silos, but together with others. And I think youth ultimately acts as a catalyst for such a change, right? Our generation marks the departure from this neoliberal thinking of individualism into a new era of communitarianism and stakeholder capitalism. And youth and the new generation can really be best defined by our purpose-driven way of thinking. And I think this would mean that the youth is strongest in applying its ability to work together as a collective with common values and the ability to ask questions about purpose, ethics, to encourage our respective organizations and groups to constantly think about the purpose of their actions. And this is quite a different kind of accountability that manifests beyond existing institutional structures. It's a kind of soft power, so to speak, that we can bring onto the table to drive climate action across sectors.
And to me, I think one of the biggest advantage of us will be we don't afraid of failure. We don't afraid that we failed once or twice. We just get up and do it again, or we try different ways to doing it. But yeah, I'm not saying adults are afraid of failures. Maybe some, but I feel like we're youth. We're a lot more. We have a lot more courage out of. I don't know where it does it come from. It just out of nowhere. And this actually motivates us to take actions that people back then may not have the courage or may not have the ambitions to take. And like you, Natalie, you found it fair, and at a time that no one actually talked about local tourism in Hong Kong, and that is a great start, and probably something that probably at my age I won't be doing. I don't know. Yeah, I think you like the fearless is something that we can bring to the table, especially with the government. And the other thing that I think we can do with the government is showing them we are the future generation, and we should have a seat on the table where the discussion about our future is taking place. And I admire Greta Thunberg because I agree with what she's saying. Like, we are afraid of what is going to happen, and we don't want to just see that happening. So we should stand up for ourselves and for our generation, or even like our future generation, to say to the people now who are in power, who are having all these power to make decisions, to tell them that we demand changes now.
Diane, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think all of us have tried to contribute to our world and try to make our world better. And I guess most of us have experienced the failure and then to move on and start a better project. And I guess my second project, Understanding Recognition from Classics Reading, is also a pilot to foster transsector collaboration. We are no longer in a world that mainly depend on single discipline solutions to solve the problems, but we are moving to a world that transdisciplinary collaborations can take place to achieve larger goals, that youth can make good use of their creativity and incorporate more elements in their work to fight for our better future.
Great. We have some questions coming from our audience, and given the time limitation, maybe we can address one, which is related to how would you promote sustainability to youth even younger than yourselves? This is a challenge. We're already very young. Just kidding. Maybe we can start with the youngest here first. Diane, how would you promote sustainability to people even younger?
Last time I noticed that there is a very young child. There was a very young child, like I guess 3 years old or 4 years old, just like a little baby, and he was crying because there is a bee. There was a bee that flying around him, and he was very scared. When I was when I was having a tour with all the participants, his mom was very worried, and he tried to comfort that little baby, but she fails, and I just walk in front, walk and try to understand his needs. And he told me that he was very afraid because he thought that the bee would bite him. And just like, I guess most of us would be afraid of exposing ourselves to the nature because we think there are many dangerous things that, but actually, after we expose ourselves to the beautiful scenery and the natural environment, and we try to deliver some positive message to those little child, telling them what is sustainability, what is the environment can be good, and we can live harmony with all the animals and all the plants, that actually can try different methods to allow them to understand the beauty of the nature, not just telling children about the something like in the text appear in the textbook, but we can just bring them into the nature, then they can feel and they can react.
What about Hermia or Brian?
Should I address Esther's question as well, because I just saw it?
Sure.
So for young kids, I think there are two different approaches, like right to adults or to younger kids. To younger kids, I think it's very easy to plant a seed in their head. They know right away what is right, what is wrong. Let's say seeing plastic on the beach, they know that plastic does not belong to the sea, does not belong to the beach. They know that that is wrong, and they know that they should do something to change it. and they don't really care about like the economic value behind because they don't really know about all this stuff. And it's easy to plant the seeds, but it's difficult for them to take action because sometimes like what they're doing is quite restricted by parents, or like they want to use reusable bottles, but maybe the parents like, oh, this one is easier to, like, I don't have to clean it. So parents make a lot of decisions. It's easy to plant the seeds, but it's difficult for them to make a huge impact. Whereas for parents or for especially people who had grandchildren, children, the way to engage them for me is to remind them that our action today will actually impact the future of your children. And once they have like the, I don't know what button is on, it's like the compassion button, and they know right away what to do and what not to do. And because that is something they prioritize over money, over economic development, over everything like that, it is the future of their child. Like, yeah, especially for Asian parents, I think we have tiger mothers, they're all doing it for the future of the children. So they should know what to do best, which is to conserve the environment.
Yeah, and just to add to Hermia's point, I think a lot of parents and grandparents, they, they're probably open to the idea of joining the movement and doing their part, but sometimes they may not know what's the best way of doing so. And so I think for us, it's best if we could make things easier for them. And when it comes to educating the youth, the really young, I think it's good to let them realize that sustainability can be practiced in um, everyday life, teaching them the habit of recycling, of upcycling, and appreciating the beauty of nature. And I think one key development that we see in Hong Kong, for example, is you see more and more urban farms. I think that's one example of how you make things easier for children and for families. It's easier for them to take their kid to these urban farms to learn about nature in the city without the need to like going out to the wild. I think, and I think it's good to sign up to education programs, that there are quite a lot available on offering. And if you're interested, there we at New World we actually do offer some education programs for children as well, at Nature Discovery Park at K11 Museum. I just sent the link in the chat box if anyone's interested. So yeah, so I guess just to like sum up, it's good to make things easier for them. We should engage them as early as possible and make sustainability a part of our daily life.
Great, thank you so much, and good advertisement, Brian. So I guess on this note, we'll end today's discussion. It's great to hear from a panel of speakers showcasing the efforts of Hong Kong youths advancing sustainability agenda, especially climate action in the corporate sector and government and civil society, and how important it is to let everyone know that no one is too small to make a difference. We are all at our 20s, and we're already starting a small revolution to create a future that we all want to see, a future that is aligned with Paris Agreement, that can keep our temperature rise within 1.5 degrees Celsius through achieving net zero by 2050. Thank you once again, CGL Sustainability, for hosting this and allowing us to tell you all what we are doing here in Hong Kong and exchanging experience with Singapore. And we look forward to more dialogues with youths in Asia Pacific so that we can exchange our knowledge and build capacity across geographical boundaries. Let me now pass the time to Marilyn for her closing remark.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you, panelists, for such a robust discussion. Before everyone leaves, we'd like to take a quick screen grab of everyone on the screen. So if you can you please turn on your camera and strike a pose, and we'll count down from 3. 3, 2, 1. Okay, thanks everyone for joining our 18th virtual essay once again. As mentioned before, this session has been recorded and will be posted on our CDL Sustainability YouTube page for your viewing. Thanks again for joining, and stay safe, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Stay connected.
Thank you very much.